When we get very negative, a lot of negativity can be a sign of depression, not a sign necessarily of being a bitter person, but I really have meditated a lot on negativity as being a defense mechanism. Because if you push things away, if you're not expecting too much, you can't get hurt. If things are already not going to go super great, you're not going to be let down too much. Being excited about things, looking forward to things, hoping, dreaming is incredibly vulnerable.
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space for everyday magic for your everyday life. We do this through rituals, aligning yourself to your soul's purpose, and creating alchemy to heal our mind, body, and spirits so that you can bring in more love and joy, manifest your desires, and believe in your dreams. Listen and watch over at graceduong.com/podcast and on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and all the places you can find me on social media. Now let's dive in to today's episode.
Welcome to the GRACED podcast, a space where we talk about everyday magic for your everyday life. Today's guest is Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, artist, writer, and the creator of The Moon Book, a beautiful guide to lunar living and intuition. In this episode, we explore themes of the moon. This tarot card is known for mystery, intuition, illusion, and the unknown, particularly from our subconscious minds. Sarah shares how to navigate moon cycles, shadow work, and how embracing the darkness can help you live more authentically in the light. Now let's get into this episode. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the GRACED podcast.
Hi, Grace. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
So excited to have you on. You're definitely someone I really respect in the witchy spiritual community. And today we're talking about themes of the Moon Tarot card. And you wrote the Moon Book, Lunar Magic to Change Your Life. You're also the creator behind the popular, dare I say, cult classic Many Moons planners. And I have a stack of them with me here. And I was honored to contribute to the 2020 edition. So I'd love to hear from you. What is your relationship to the moon and how did it start?
Yeah, I think like all creative, sensitive, intuitive people, I had a connection with the moon since I was a child. I'm sure everyone listening has a childhood memory of them in the moon, whether they were looking at the moon through their bedroom window, or a lot of folks have recounted that they'd be in the back seat of their parents' car and the moon would like be in the window and they'd be like, it looked like it was following them. Or I think all of us have this connection to the moon. In my book, I explain why we are lunar creatures. Like scientifically, our fertility is linked up with the moon. There's also, of course, scientifically the gravitational pull of the water and the moon. And of course, we're water. We're anywhere between 60 to 80% water. So when the moon cycles, we are impacted and affected. And of course, we have such a connection to nature and agriculture. And the moon plays a role in that as well, because as the moon influences water, that also has to do with agriculture. So if you've heard of biodynamic gardening and farming, that very much is about farming and growing plants with the cycles of the moon, because there are those rhythms about when to harvest, when to plant seeds, and we can do that in our own lives. So I started getting interested in the occult in my early 20s. I think I was very much looking for a way of living or a philosophy that explained the world, like in a world that didn't necessarily make sense to me, like get a job, 9 to 5, white picket fence, heteronormative kind of world didn't really seem to connect with me. And I think that the aspects of the occult and the metaphysical that had a strong emphasis on agency and on like the agency of the self and our ability to change our circumstances. I'm pretty obsessed with the science of change. I'm pretty obsessed with how we transform, how we heal trauma, how we grow. I'm pretty obsessed with how we're connected to nature and nature cycles and how that is a mirror and a template for our own cycles of growth and change. And so the moon is that symbol in the sky. The moon's cycle reflects the cycle of nature, right? We have a dark or waning moon is winter. We have the new moon is spring. We have a full moon is summer. We have the last quarter moon, the waning moon as autumn. It is this great big mirror to what we're going through in the sky, and it resets itself really a lot quicker than the seasons, which makes it incredibly useful, incredibly collaborative for pairing with our own change cycles and our own transformation. Because who wants to wait for another season to come around? Like, we get the opportunity to explore a cycle of change, a cycle of waxing and waning, of expansion and contraction, right? Every lunar cycle. So I started collaborating with the moon in my ritual work and in my internal work and in my magical work. And over time, I realized a couple of things. I realized that working with multiple lunar cycles was much more effective. And that also syncs up with studies that have been done in terms of change. It takes a new habit anywhere from 60 to 90 days to embed in our neural pathways. That's 3 lunar cycles, right? So it's effectively 3 rotations of the moon. It makes sense to me. I didn't need science to tell me that because I was living it, but it's nice to always get that affirmation, right? I also started noticing that the moon was connected to our levels and layers of consciousness as well as our body. And so that's really how we create change, through the body and through the levels and layers of consciousness. So during certain lunar phases, working with the process I suggest in my book and I guide everyone through and many moons, I would time processes for letting go and reprogramming during the waning moon. I would time new actions, new thoughts that were associated to the prefrontal cortex, new habits during the waxing moon. So I would begin timing it all around like one theme or one topic. I wouldn't do like too much all at once, but I would say, let's just say it would be money or finances. And I would, through the guidance of the moon, giving us a 360-degree lens, right? So you're not only looking at your aspirations around finances, you're looking at the shadows that you have around finances. You're not only starting a savings account, but you're noticing in your body what's happening and you're rewiring it over and over. And that's how you change. You change through the body, through the nervous system, through different levels and layers of consciousness, and through creating new habits and associating new positive capacities with those habits. So it was so natural to me. It was like as if the moon just told me what to do. The moon was like, no, you see, this part of like, this is linked to your subconscious and this part is linked to your superconscious. And here's your body and here's what you can do. And this is how we create cycles and seasons of change. And this is how I can help you. And it almost feels like she was trying to get me to understand how these things worked. And so through working with those, I began to see amazing change in my own life. And of course, as one does, when you see change in your life and you're super excited by something, you want to tell other people about it. You want other people to understand that like the patriarchal, linear, push, hustle, we only go up or whatever. I wanted them to be like, no. There's a much more natural way. There's a much more organic way. And the coolest part, I think, I mean, there's so many cool parts about this process and this discovery I made and then created this modality. But what I think is the most awesome part, and this is like the main aspect of my work when I work with people and I work with groups, through doing this, you get to know yourself so well. You get to know your intuitive gifts. You get to know how your intuition functions. You get to know what you prefer. You get to know like how you make change and like what's easy for you. You get to create your own modalities and your own practices and your own rituals. So you heighten the relationship with yourself, your intuition, and then by doing so with the entire world. Because when we know ourselves better and we're more secure, we can connect with people on a much easier, more intentional and vulnerable level. And that is, to me, the main aspects of the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. There's so much juiciness all wrapped up in there. I love that you link science to magic and the occult, because I feel like the occult is kind of a visceral where you can't really like explain some things, but so much of it is within your own making, right? Like, and science is tied into that because you're talking about cycles and seasons and timing. And you're also talking about how timing isn't necessarily linear. However, the moon does operate on a certain cycle, and you're also noticing it takes like 3 lunar cycles, which is kind of like 3 months, so that is a season, so to speak. But you write in your book, in astrology, psychology, and some magical traditions, the moon represents the subconscious. The subconscious is a source of our yearning and fear. It is where the stories and motivations behind our conscious behavior reveal themselves. When we decide to program our subconscious, we change our beliefs. When we change our beliefs, our behavior changes. When our behavior changes, our life changes. So basically everything you were just talking about. For anyone struggling to make changes, how can we utilize the power of the moon to illuminate our shadows? And how can we make those desired changes that can also be rooted in fear?
Mm-hmm. I love this topic. I was just talking about this yesterday in a class I was teaching. It is absolutely going to be some of the courses and workshops I'm going to be doing next year. And that's this idea of we often are afraid to make change because of our past. That's also the moon, right? The moon is like linked to the past. And in the moon card, in the tarot, we see this connection really strongly of the past, of some kind of pull that seems bigger than us or greater than us. When we get the moon card, usually, I know like in traditional tarot, it's linked to fuzziness, murkiness, like obstructed things, hidden things. But for me and my practice as I teach it, the moon is the second in what I call the sequence of sight. I call the star, the moon, and the sun the sequence of sight. And what those 3 cards together, the star, we see the little pinpricks of light that help give us direction after a period of challenge or hardship. We begin to create new constellations and new stories in the star. That's why it's such like a healing, beautiful soul retrieval kind of card. Then in the moon, we're often faced with the challenge to that aspiration. Often when we pull the moon card, not always, but often, we're like, wait, why am I back here again? Like, wait, I thought I had figured this out by now. Wait, like, I thought I should be over this. Or, why is this person I'm dating just like the last person I thought I had healed and gone to therapy about? We're often like, what the F, right? And we can think it's our fault. We can immediately blame ourselves. We can blame the universe. We can think we're unlucky. But what is happening is, there's some psychological reasons for it that maybe I'll get into. There's this idea of repetitive compulsion, which is that we seek to recreate challenging circumstances because they either feel familiar with us and our nervous system. That's why you keep dating the same person, although they're different people, right? Because your nervous system codes, say, folks who are avoidant or folks who are mean as being safe, because we have to remember that safety just means familiarity and normal. If you're used to hustle and like go, that's your level of safety because it's been normalized, and it's hard for your body and your nervous system and your brain and your subconscious to adapt to feel safe at a different level, right? So we get into these challenges to our dreams or to our safety in order to move past them, in order to respond in a different way so that we can tell ourselves we're safe to move on, so we can complete a cycle, so we can resolve something and assure ourselves that we're safe and learn a little bit more each time. I don't know if any listeners or you, Grace, have really had to learn some lessons the hard way. And now you're like, oh, I know what those flags are. Or even just like next time I'll get a contract, Or, next time I'll ask these questions to my landlord. Or, we learn through experience. And so that's the moon card. The moon card is like, okay, maybe you're in a similar situation. Maybe you feel like you're getting pulled under by the tide. But where can you create agency and safety and create new patterns? Like I often talk about, we spiral out of stuckness. If we're just circling and circling and circling, that's a flat circle and we're never going to get out. Like we're trapped. But if we spiral out, if like we're 5% more confident, if we, instead of 17 dates with someone who's maybe not the best for us, we have 4 dates. To me, that's progress and that's the spiral. So often, I don't know, I'd love to hear what your beliefs are, Grace. I'll just share a little bit of mine. One of my beliefs is that we all come in with a set of specific challenges around certain themes. And part of our life's path is to both heal those themes through a series of experiences we get exposed to again and again, right? Or the medicine and the gifts of our lives is found through alchemizing and transforming those shadows into light, right? So I think that I in no way do I want to romanticize challenges or suffering. I don't want any suffering or challenges for myself, my loved ones, or anyone else on the planet. I'm not on any level trying to romanticize violence, abuse, and trauma. Our world is we're in some really dark times right now. I don't on any level want to romanticize any of it. And I also don't on any level want to suggest that we necessarily agreed to undergo challenging things. I just want to be like really clear with that. I don't think I asked for any of the hardship I got. And in fact, I would prefer to have learned in a different way, as I'm sure many people who've been through hell and back would feel the same. I do know that the ability to alchemize and to transform certain shadows is one of the greatest, most rewarding things we can do as people. I do know that what we learn as a result of moving through those things in a different way and really learning what security to ourselves feels like, what love feels like, is one of the most priceless gifts I know that I could ever experience. So that's kind of a little bit of what I'll say about that.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I feel like we all come to Earth with our soul contracts, and we also carry karma with us. And I think that we come into our current lives with a certain lesson to learn, or many lessons, because it's a culmination of things. We're all multidimensional, so it's not like we come in and we're only learning one thing. I feel like we're all balancing many things at many times. And at this time, there's so much polarity going on. I do believe it's because a lot of people just haven't dealt with their shadows and kept pushing it down and down and down. And it usually comes out as projection, which I feel like is something the moon does. It illuminates shadows. And so if you're not dealing with your own stuff, it tends to come out in other ways. And I will say personally, like recently, I got my wisdom teeth out like 2 weeks ago, and I felt like all this ancestral stuff was coming up. I was like, oh my God, like what is going on? Like all this pain was coming up. I mean, obviously I was like dealing with my wisdom teeth coming out, so there's pain there, but there was all this like emotional pain too. And I feel like something about letting go of old ancestral beliefs was coming up, which I also feel like what ties us and the planet and the moon and our soul contracts and whatever is like the moon has been present for all of those stories. And sometimes the stories that we come into this life with aren't even ours. So I can recognize in myself when I'm like, in these patterns, and I'm like, okay, this is great. Like I really relate to what you said earlier about like the hustling and proactive and blah, blah, blah. And like these 2 weeks, I like really couldn't do anything. I had to rest. I really had to rest. And it was like the universe was like, you need to stop. And I feel like sometimes we just need something like that to stop our patterns. And I think sometimes pain is obviously uncomfortable, but pain is part of the process, and it can also be a catalyst to our growth.
Yeah, I love so much of what you shared. Absolutely, the moon is linked to ancestors, ancestral gifts, ancestral trauma, ancestral stories, because where is this all carried? Like in the body, in our DNA and our cells. And again, there's a whole scientific field that is backing what many indigenous traditions already knew, which is that DNA and cells, I think it's 7 generations, are carried, and that if trauma happens in one generation, certain DNA and cells can be switched on that weren't, and it can continue on. So if your grandparents or great grandparents, I think everybody listening's ancestors dealt with, again, levels and layers of trauma. And so we carry that in our body. And if you're a cycle breaker, which I think probably many people listening to this are, I think whether we're conscious of it or not, all of us are cycle breakers in some ways, pattern disruptors. We are creating new cycles. We're ending old cycles that maybe we didn't consent to or that we've been carrying. And then we're creating new cycles. So the projection part is major and it's huge because you know this and folks listening probably know, but usually 101 shadow stuff is looking at people you're envious of or people who irritate you and figuring out why that is, because it might be something in you either don't like, like if you think someone is annoying because I'll use myself as an example, talk a lot. Maybe you have stuff where you secretly wish you could use your voice a little bit more. And if you do some journaling about it or some investigation, you figure out, oh, when you were a child, you used to love to sing, but your mom told you to be quiet all the time. And now you kind of harbor resentment around people who can express themselves easily. That's like an example, right, of shadow work. But the other part of shadow work that has just been really useful for me is being able to parse out the levels and layers of our emotions and get really real about what's happening, because the moon can speak to projections. It can speak to cognitive distortions. It could speak to us projecting onto other people in positive ways and in negative ways. And anytime we're too much in projection, there is the possibility of some stuff going haywire. And so for me, taking accountability for my emotions and figuring out what's mine and what am I projecting, I'll often say to people, because the moon card also in some traditions is like linked to gossip or things like that, I've heard. And so you can ask yourself, am I making a story up about this person so that I can experience an emotion that is taboo for me to have? I have found this to be true in my own life, where like if you're on the internet, if you're someone who people think they know, and we see this with celebrities and things of that nature, you often serve as a cutout, a flat projection. If someone's having a bad day, you then become the symbol of that bad day because that person hasn't taken a minute to be with their emotions, be like, oh, yeah, maybe I'm feeling kind of sad because it's the anniversary of my first breakup with my partner. Also very moon things, like the body keeps the memory. You're not tracking, you're not understanding, you're not letting yourself feel that feeling. So that sadness might turn into anger, or it might turn into defensiveness, or it might turn into snapping at a coworker or cutting someone off in traffic. If we're not conscious of our emotions, they become projections. And that can really do harm to both ourselves and to just random people or beloveds in our lives. So the moon to me is this card around radical responsibility around our emotions. Not that they're bad, in that like we need to get really real with ourselves and question what's going on. It's like, do we not like that person, or are we threatened by them? Are we intimidated by them? Or do they remind us of a parent that wasn't kind to us? Or, we just getting clear on that is so freeing. It's also okay to admit you don't like someone. Not everyone has to be everyone's cup of tea. You can just move on. You can be like, you know what? Actually, I don't like so-and-so. I'm just going to move on. Not everything is like shadow work and you're the mirror. Like sometimes you can just admit that certain people, certain singers, certain flavors of sparkling water are just not your bag, and you can get to move on. You don't need to make a big drama about it. You don't need to create a story. You don't need to start a rumor about them or make anyone who likes the flavored sparkling water bad. you can just have your preferences and your feelings about them, process them. And I know the world would be a much, much, much easier place to navigate if more people were taking accountability and responsibility for the levels and layers of their emotions. Emotional literacy. That's what I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I love that term. And I don't think we hear it enough because I feel like the internet is just like a playground for people who probably aren't feeling safe to express themselves because that is a safe way to express anger or whatever it is they're feeling. I feel like a lot of anger lately, especially at people they don't know. And it's interesting that I think safety is a necessary means to create change. And I think a lot of the times in this world, it's not designed for us to feel safe. So I think that speaks to this radical responsibility of understanding our emotions and understanding, like, is this like a real thing or is this a pattern thing? Like, am I reacting to something? And something that I'm hearing from you that you're saying is not being afraid to question yourself. And you mentioned cognitive distortion. And I'm wondering, like, how can we, if we're so used to this patterned way of thinking and perhaps even skewing things in a way that fits our narrative, how do we recognize that we may be skewing things in our favor?
Oh, yeah. What an amazing question. I love this question. And I wanted to respond with what you said, 1000%, feeling safe inside our body. And I would also say feeling like we can trust ourselves, right? We can trust ourselves to feel uncomfortable. We can trust ourselves to not know. That's like a big one. You know, we can trust ourselves to be in process. We can trust ourselves to still love ourselves even when we're not super productive or even when we're not doing our to-do lists or whatever. That was a really big one for me, at least. How can we tell if we're really like operating from cognitive distortions? Well, I think I just want to throw it out to folks listening if they're into this. I believe that if you literally Google like common cognitive distortions, it'll show up like a list of 12 or something like this. I literally just did a podcast episode on this. So it's in my mind I did 3 examples of what psychologists call magical thinking. And I thought that was hilarious because, you know, magical thinking, the episode is called Magical Thinking versus Magical Thinking, meaning like magical thinking like us, like we're creative, we're making things happen, we're using our intuition to make things that didn't exist. To me, that's magical thinking. Creator consciousness is like magical thinking in terms of like our world. But there's also psychological term, magical thinking. And so like the ones I pulled out were this belief, a lot of it is around either waiting for other people to give you permission. So like someone else will take care of it. Or when someone tells me I'm good enough, then I can apply for the job or that thing. Another is if I avoid it, it'll go away. So anything extreme, if you're avoiding certain things too much, if you're kind of disassociating or numbing out too much, or if you're overriding, if you're like trying to make certain things happen, usually a indicator that you are in a form of thinking that will not be helpful to you is either or rigid, yes, no thinking. If you can't do this thing, or sometimes it's if everyone else can have this thing, but I can't have it. If there are these younger parts of us that are running the show, usually a sign is that it's very either or, it's very rigid. And there's this paradox that when we can create more safety in ourselves and our nervous system, that in turn creates curiosity and it creates more openness. If we can become more expanded, if we can become both grounded and soft, then our thought processes opens up. And it's funny, Grace, I've been thinking of doing a whole series of like how to tell you're healing or how to tell you are making change. I'll give an example from my own life. Just today, I was like, yeah, I really should start journaling about this because a lot of my thinking around certain things are getting shaken up and like loosened up, where once there was a lot of rigidity and contraction. You have to remember that's how we often were taught to be safe, is to be defensive, is to like contract, is to be in the little chrysalis, is to like get under the weighted blanket or under the bed or in the closet or not be seen or not really move our body. You know, we have to remember that that is such a beautiful and intelligent response to a rupture or heartbreak or disappointment or grief. I just want to name that. There's nothing wrong with you if you're in more protective, feeling guarded, don't want to peek out of the cave. Totally normal. Take as long as you need, right? But I realized that I was on my way today to do a medical healing procedure. And I was driving there and I remember thinking, I'm so excited for this. This could be the beginning of really beautiful change. And previously around certain health stuff, I had been really protective. And I had been really cautious. I had not let myself. That's another thing that folks can kind of clock in themselves. We're protecting ourselves when we don't let ourselves get too excited or we don't let ourselves dream too much. It's when we're like, again, like, I bet this is going to be more of the same. Or like when we get very negative, a lot of negativity can be a sign of depression. Not a sign necessarily of being like a bitter person, but I really have meditated a lot on negativity as being a defense mechanism. Because if you push things away, if you're not expecting too much, you can't get hurt. If things are already not going to go super great, you're not going to be let down too much. Being excited about things, looking forward to things, hoping, dreaming is incredibly vulnerable. We don't really name it as such, but it is. When you're trying in public, or think about it when we were little, like showing that you liked someone, that wasn't cool. You know, you weren't like, oh, you're so cool, want to play with me? Like, it was only cool to be like that as a child. But like once we hit chemicals and puberty, like that wasn't cool. Remember, like, I don't know about you, but I was taught if someone like treats you poorly, they like you. Like, I don't know, like if boys treated you poorly, they like you. So all is that to say, watching for the shape of your responses to life. Are your responses to life neutral? Are they shut down and closed and contracted and you're like bracing yourself or holding your breath? Are they open? Are they relaxed? Is your belly soft? Are you looking forward to meeting that friend for dinner? Are you starting to get excited about your next project where you might like to move? That is kind of how I gauge it. And I clock it in myself by some of the stories I tell myself about what is happening as well. So hopefully that was useful to folks.
Hey there, mystics! Are you ready to unlock the true potential of your tarot practice? Imagine going beyond basic readings and tapping into the transformative alchemy of tarot, where every card becomes a catalyst for change, growth, and manifestation. That's exactly what you'll discover in the Tarot for Alchemy course. With over 116 lessons designed to unlock your authentic self through tarot, this course will guide you to deeply understand your past so you can make powerful, aligned decisions for your future. This isn't just another tarot class. It's a transformational journey into how tarot can become your ultimate tool for self-discovery, shadow work, and manifestation. In this course, you'll learn how to align with the energy of each card for personal transformation, use tarot for manifestation and decision-making, and develop your unique tarot style to read with confidence. But let's get real. What happens if you don't join? You'll miss out on breakthroughs that could completely shift your life. You'll stay stuck in surface-level readings, leaving untapped potential on the table. And those big dreams you've been working toward, they'll stay just out of reach. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced reader, the Tarot for Alchemy course will take your skills to the next level. Plus, you'll get access to exclusive bonuses, resources, exercises, and a supportive community of like-minded seekers. Don't let another day go by without taking this step for yourself. Visit learntarot.mysticmondays.com to learn more and join today. Now let's get back to this episode.
Yeah, I can also pinpoint to like things that I do where I'm behaving in a way that is just protecting myself. And I think a lot of what we do in the world, because the world can feel unsafe, at times.
It is unsafe. The world is, let's just say it is unsafe for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of what we do is to protect ourselves and to feel safe, even if that's not what we really want. And so I actually love that you brought up these signals to yourself that you are embarking on change, or there are certain things changing, because I think sometimes we can get so sucked into our everyday habits that we're not really noticing the signs. So what are some signs of change for you?
As I've said, when I start noticing that I'm thinking about change with excitement or with neutrality, I think neutrality is always a really good place to be measured. That's a really good place. Also, depending on the state of your nervous system, if you are, in fact, if you've maybe been shut down, if you've maybe been in an overly protective mode for a while, one thing I tell folks that not a lot of people talk about, but one of the first signs that you're getting out of freeze is anxiety, anger, irritation, because your nervous system is rewiring and remapping. And so sometimes after a long period of shutdown or kind of numbing, the ability to feel feelings, like any feelings, right? If you're like, I'm so angry right now, that often to me is a sign that energy is moving, that your body understands it is safe to express energy, right? Because going back to safety, and especially you can probably relate, Grace, creativity is an expression. We have to feel safe in order to create. So expressions, if you're like, I want to go out dancing, or I want to move my body, and allowing your body to move in different shapes, I think that's usually a sign as well. The last thing I will say is that a really important part of healing, at least in my process and what I teach, is being able to have a different perspective around what happened and being able to either learn the lessons, make meaning, or even in some cases, but not always. Again, I don't want to romanticize anything, but even sometimes feel grateful. Like, oh, I'm so glad that my fiance broke up with me. Obviously, this might take years, but like understanding that even though something was very, very painful and hard, maybe you dodged a bullet, or maybe you wouldn't have ended up doing this other thing, or maybe you wouldn't have met this other person. Is like hindsight is 20/20 often. So getting to a place where you understand what maybe you were supposed to learn, especially so that, tying it back to the moon, if something similar happens again, or you can trust yourself to be able to notice certain things that what happened in the past taught you. You're like, oh, you know what? I don't think I should, take that job, or you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have that third date with that person, or whatever it may be. The last thing I will say, and then I will stop because I would love to hear from you, because like everything you say, I'm just like, we just want to respond to that. I think like this is a weird one for me to say, but I think someone listening to this needs to hear it, because I said it before and I want to say it again in a different way. Being okay and secure with your preferences. Just like, no, that's a no, not now. I don't even necessarily want to say boundaries. I just want to say preferences, understanding what you need and what you would like, and being able to make choices and decisions off of that without guilt, without shame, without any kind of tension.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because there's a theme of acceptance. You mentioned radical responsibility, but there's also radical acceptance for what we desire. And even going back to that example of like, oh, I was told that if boys like me, they treat me poorly. But even like maybe your body is saying that's not true, or maybe something within you is like, well, I don't actually like buy into that. If this boy likes me, then he treats me badly because I feel bad. And that is a sign that that's not true. And so I think that goes back to like questioning ourselves and questioning what we're told, but also really inquiring what our needs are and what our preferences are, and not necessarily making a story about why we're wrong for wanting certain things, which I feel like there's so much shame around, let's say I want like strawberry ice cream versus vanilla or whatever, right? Like if I want strawberry today, then I want strawberry and that's okay. And that is just my preference and that is fine and that's acceptance. Whereas, maybe back in the day you were bullied for that. Or maybe there was, a certain stigma against strawberry ice cream or whatever. And I feel like that comes down to power because you were talking about taking agency, right? And I think the power of voicing our needs is something that has just been like stifled over time, and coming back into that power and, this lunation of power within, let's say, the dark moon, which is something that I would love to ask you about. I feel like there's power in creativity as well, and we're both creatives. So I love that you mentioned creativity. So before we get into the dark moon, I just wanted to ask you, how can we use the moon phases as a blueprint for our creative process, and what is moon mapping?
So we can use the moon as a guide to our own natural rhythms. If folks are listening, like when I used to teach this, I might do one more class in 2025, or I might create like an evergreen thing, but I used to teach this for years. And so I'm a creative and I got tired of teaching the same thing. So I stopped. But what I always say is look what phase of the moon you were born under. So figure out what phase of the moon you were born under. And it's that. And for folks wanting to know how to do that, you don't even need to know your time of birth. You don't need to know like your astrological chart on any level. You can literally just Google your birth date and like moon phase, and you will be able to find, was the moon full? Was there a new moon? It also, while I'm like in the weeds, it's also useful and helpful to look up if you were born a couple weeks on either side or in between an eclipse. It's good to know for what eclipse season might bring you. So similar to, let's just say, someone being born under Mercury retrograde. And so when Mercury is retrograde, it's either a really beautiful thing for them or like movement happens during the retrogrades. If you were born around eclipse season, you might have an affinity. Like eclipse season might be like really powerful for you and a time of like real turbo change in charge. I was born under a dark moon right around eclipse, like just like a week before an eclipse. So I was like, oh, that tracks because I love eclipses. And I've tried to really be clear. Like there's a lot of eclipse hatred out there. And I've tried to reposition eclipses as a time of great change if you are ready for that. So look up what phase the moon was in when you were born. Start to notice over a whole lunar cycle, maybe a couple lunar cycles, what is going on with your body, what is going on with your energy levels, your intuition. And it's easiest to tell, obviously, around full moons and new moons. But for example, let's just say if you were born under a waning moon, the waning moon cycle might be the most fruitful for you because you might feel most at home, right? So if you're creative, if like there are so many different ways we can work with the moon and creativity, right? And this like really cool way, I think we've already given folks suggestions like through our talk, whether it's channeling energy, expression, anger, emotional expression through our art, whether it's through getting more honest with ourselves, whether it's through dropping down into our subconscious. I don't know about you, Grace, but I love to program my subconscious. So for example, let's say I have to teach a class. This is literally how my like creativity works. I'm like, or I'll tell my subconscious, okay, I'm going to teach this class in a month. It's going to be about these things. I want the participants to undergo these things. I need you to come up with like 3 meditations. I'll just tell my subconscious. Then I live and I wait for, oh yeah, I'm in the shower. Oh, okay. Like, let me write this down in my notes app. Oh, I'm chopping vegetables. Oh, got it. Like that. I call it the hunter-gatherer method. It's like, I tell my subconscious what I need. And my subconscious is like, okay, we'll figure this out. That's how I like to work. Or getting into a more relaxed state to work, to be creative. And for me, what that often looks like is not going right to the computer, but drawing first, writing things down first. And that is literally where the next thing I will talk about came from. And that's moon mapping. So if you're a creative, notice your rhythms of creativity, notice what like lunar aspects and what lunar phases you feel most drawn to or most generative around, right? And use that as your gentle guide. You don't have to force anything. You can work with every phase of the moon in any way you want, but you can start to kind of know. The other thing that I do want to say that I teach, what I love about the moon is if that you're going to be completely wired during a full moon, which is what I hear from a lot of people around a full moon, leading up a couple days leading up, and then maybe the day after. Maybe if you can not plan a big presentation, maybe if you can like not plan a breakup conversation or not plan your calendar to be super stacked around a full moon, if that. Conversely, I always feel really good. I'm always like, woo. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go out. Let's go to a concert. Like, I'm going to socialize. Like, that's fun for me, but I know that's not for everyone. So literally lunar work, the moon is about our intuition, our needs. A lot of astrologers correlate the moon with hunger and what we need to feed ourselves literally and figuratively in order to feel nourished and in order to feel safe. A lot of astrological traditions pair it with the mother or pair it with our main caretaker. So as adults, we're our main caretaker. So we have to parent. So lunar work is reparenting work, right? It's psychic work, it's intuitive work, it's creative work. It's also reparenting work, which is, of course, what feeds the creativity and feeds the intuition. So moon mapping is the method. It's what I called working with one entire lunar cycle, where you pick the theme or the themes you want to focus on, where you want to see growth around. Again, it can be finances or self-care or activism, whatever it might be, getting rid of a bad habit, anything really that you want. There's nothing too big or too small, right? And then you take it through the phases of the moon, where during the new moon, you set your intention around it. During the waxing, you create new actions around it in the world every day or every couple of days. At the full moon, you reassess, you see how far you've come and what you want to do more around. And then in the waning moon, you do that behind the scenes work, decluttering, clearing, wrapping up loose ends, subconscious reprogramming, all of those kinds of things. So that when you arrive at the next new moon, you made progress on the inner and you've made progress on the outer world. And humans love to see progress. Like we love to see external and internal change. And so I call lunar work a transformation from the inside out. And that's really what we want, right? Like that's what I want.
Yeah. And I also just want to note, like, sometimes it takes many moon cycles for something to manifest. I'll speak for me. Sometimes I'll set an intention on the new moon and I'm like, oh my God, it's like 28 days later and this thing still hasn't appeared yet. And so I think just giving yourself like the grace or just knowing that it takes time, right? And I feel like something about the moon that's really interesting is that it's so structured, actually. It's like on time, like every 3 days, it shifts into a new phase. And it's so interesting because I feel like the moon is so tied into our emotions. And I love that you mentioned that this work is reparenting work because the moon is so structured. It doesn't fail you. You always know what phase it's going to go in. And I feel like the reparenting comes when it comes to understanding your reactions to things that come up during those certain time periods in your life. And I feel like we're so in sync in this conversation because I wanted to just be like, hey, I was born during a waning moon phase. And you literally you mentioned the waning moon phase, which I thought was really cool. So I think generally we hear about how the new moon is really great for setting intentions and the full moon is where that thing can manifest or whatever it is. And I would love to ask you about the moon phase that you were born under, which is the dark moon and that dark moon magic, because I don't think a lot of people know about what that is. So what archetype is associated with the dark moon and how can we use this lunar phase for its lunar magic, but also to prepare for the new moon cycle?
Yeah, the dark moon. Wow. Have you worked at all with the dark moon, Grace?
I haven't.
But you haven't. Well, you were born under the waning moon. Do you know, were you closer to the full moon or closer to the dark moon? Do you know, like, were you waning?
I think I'm closer to the dark moon, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, I'd just be really curious as we're talking right now. I don't know when this is going to air, but as we're talking, we're about a week-ish, not quite after the full moon. So I'm wondering if you can notice, like, for yourself this week, how your energy is, like what you feel called to do. Like, do you feel more like in your element? Like, it might be that the full moon is like a lot for you. And then after, you're like, you can make sense of some of the downloads, or you like feel like things flow more, or whatever that might be. The dark moon is a phase of the moon that is just before the new moon. Occultists would say it's like the 3 days before the new moon. It's when you can't see the moon. It's like when the position of the sun is such that you can't see the moon. It's dark in the sky. It's associated with big death and rebirth goddesses, like taboo goddesses such as Lilith. I think about Inanna, maybe even Kali. It's literally what we do in the dark. And so what we do in the dark often is grieve, is receive downloads, is have sex, is do secretive, more taboo things like rituals. We rest. And so for me, it's this very, very regenerative time where what you do here is like the deepest seeding or the deepest clearing that someone can do. It's where we really make peace with the lessons we've learned, and we're able to do some kind of process to let go of certain things we don't want to take with us, and to go down even deeper into like our own soil or our own roots in order to create something really visionary. Because we know that seeds grow in the dark. We know that we're in the dark for the first 9 months or so of our lives. We also know that the unknown, we can also think of the unknown as the dark, because we can't see exactly what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. So I've been thinking a lot about creating new roads. So like open roads, clearing, creating new pathways, creating new timelines. The dark moon is a very fertile time to do that kind of paradigm switching. We've talked several times in this conversation about stories and storytelling. It's a beautiful time to seed new stories. I've never told anyone this, but I actually think a lot about the tarot card that correlates with the dark moon as being the star. Like, it comes before the moon. It's like this moment where you can be very vulnerable with yourself, dive down deep. It can also sometimes correlate with, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Grace, but when you've been doing like a lot of healing work and you do get an illumination or you're like, oh, this is why I'm like this, or, oh, this is why I was acting like this. Your mind finally, it coalesces like, oh, it was because of this really old thing that happened, or this parental dynamic I noticed that I then recreated. And to me, it's a time where we can make the invisible, the unconscious, as it were, visible. And when we can do that, we change our perspective, we get an awakening, and then we can really make change. Because you talked about power and agency. We get to be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Or like, oh, I'm so unconsciously positioning myself as the outsider. Or, oh, I'm not even noticing I'm pushing people away. Or I'm not even noticing I'm self-sabotaging. Or that was self-sabotage. It's when we notice those shadow stuff that are so hidden. It's like how the star comes after the devil and the tower. The star is like looking at what transpired and being like, oh, but I want to do things in a different way. I want to be my own person. I don't want to self-sabotage. Okay, now I know that behavior or that story or that thought process, or now I notice what happens in my body. Okay, let me slow it down and let me try something different. To me, that's very dark moon. It's this culmination of wisdom. And then it seeds the intention of the new moon, the conscious intention of the new moon. And often the conscious intention of the new moon will not work if we haven't done the shadow work, if we haven't figured out the origin of that shameful story or the origin of that self-sabotaging behavior or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful in that there's a full spectrum of where we can exist. And I love that you mention different roads and pathways and timelines that we can enter just because you are in this present moment. And I know some people may feel stuck in where they are. It doesn't mean that you can't create a new paradigm for yourself. And I feel like the void is where creation is made, right? Like the void is associated with female sexuality and the universe and the Big Bang and all of that. And I feel like the void is where we can uncover our truths because it's not necessarily being casted upon any like projection or story or whatever. It's kind of like nothingness where we can create our own truths. And I just want to go back to what you said about you tell your subconscious that I want to do a workshop, I want meditations, et cetera, et cetera. And I love that you mentioned that because I feel like you're like literally telling your subconscious like a computer, like a program. You're like, I want this and this. It's like you're not asking Google, you're asking your intuition as if it's Google. And you're like, I'm not going to sweat about when the answers come to me. They'll come to me when they're ready to come to me, whether it's in the shower or I'm like on a long drive or whatever, like it will come to me when I'm ready to receive that information. So I love that you mentioned that because I've been thinking a lot about us like humans as a work of technology, whether that's consciousness or how we program ourselves, because I know you've mentioned programming, reprogramming, working with your subconscious. And I think that's a huge part of it. I also like what I heard from that too was like a level of detachment of not necessarily expecting something from your intuition to deliver. Because I feel like when we put those expectations on ourselves is when we get so wrapped up in like, oh, it's not coming quick enough or whatever it is that we're telling ourselves. You're just like, I told my subconscious this and I trust that the information will be delivered to me when it is ready to come and I am ready to receive.
1000%. I want to echo things take time. I often think we get things or change happens at the pace of our nervous system and our ability to receive it. So like classic thing I used to do with my clients when I worked with one-on-one people around change work. Now I mostly just do groups, but I would ask them if you got what you wanted, like exactly what you wanted tomorrow, would you be able to handle it? Would you be able to sustain it? Would you be able to keep it? And inevitably, most of them were like, no, like they didn't have the capacity or they didn't fully have the belief or their nervous system still believed, going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, their nervous system maybe didn't believe that was safe. Right? Because again, for some of us, scarcity is safe. For some of us, like isolation is safe, right? For some of us, connection, abundance, ease, raise his hand is dangerous, right? It's dangerous because historically, when we would let our guard down, not great things would happen. So it's like rewiring and repatterning has to happen on, again, it's not, to me, it's very much not one modality. It's very much not one way. It's a mix of different aspects depending on who we are, what we need, what our intuition even tells us to do. I met a woman once and she was like, I healed my entire life through my diet, like through eating whole food. That's not me. I needed all of this stuff I'm talking to you about, which is why I share it, right? But for someone else, it literally might be creativity. That's it. Creativity and playing sports. And they become a creative director and they play tennis 3 days a week. And like, that's what they need. So the world is so heavy. The world is so hard. We're all going through so much. I don't know one person who isn't going through something very serious. I do want to say that we have to make time to carve out these lunar things that give us joy, emotional expression, physical movement and expression, and that kind of like alone lunar time, whatever it might be, whether it's the bath or the shower or once a week journaling or listening to music and crying, putting on a playlist in your car and crying. There's no shame when it happens. If you're like a busy caretaker with kids or you're taking care of an elderly parent or you're super sick and you can't get out of bed, whatever it might be, just like figuring out some simple things where you are, how you are with the capacity you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So many gems dropped. So let's move into our fast 5 questions to wrap up this conversation. I will be percolating everything you said during this conversation. It was so lovely. What is your sun, moon, and rising?
Oh, my sun is, I'm a Cancer sun, Taurus rising, and Gemini moon.
So cool because Cancer is related to the moon, right?
It's true.
So what advice would you give to your younger self?
Don't believe what other people tell you about yourself.
Powerful. How would you define everyday magic?
Living in flow and enjoyment of simple pleasures of life and being able to access spirit and the greater whole every day in some way.
What are your favorite rituals?
Definitely bath. Yeah.
Love a good bath. What are you looking forward to in the near future?
I'm looking forward to my next season.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do the collective reading.
We'll do it joint, Grace. I'm going to shuffle and you just tell me when, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Pick a number between 1 and 3.
3.
And then 1 and 2.
2.
Okay. When is this airing?
Probably sometime next year.
So we got the Hermit. That's why I asked. We got the Hermit, which is the numerological card of the year next year. This is a very mystical card about discovering the uniqueness of your gifts, your intuition, your spirituality, and your unique path. It is definitely a card about focus. It is definitely a card about paring down to what are the most important things for you, maybe the top 3 things or the top 5 things. And it's really getting rid of the noise, distractions, so that you can hear your intuition, because it usually correlates with preparation onto a new path, or like being on the path, but being in the unknown, not like just using your echolocation, using your intuition. For all y'all who live on the East Coast or in snow, you ever been in a car at night and it's snowing like wild and you can only go like 3 miles an hour and snow's everywhere and you can just see like 4 or 5 feet ahead of you and you have to trust that you're still on a road, but you can't see it. And you're just have to like surrender and go slow and be patient and keep your eyes on the road and like just be in the present moment. To me, that really resonates with the Hermit. You can only see a couple of steps ahead. You're not quite sure. You're in the unknown. You're seeking. You're looking for something, you're going somewhere, but it's often your own personal kind of process that might even be challenging to describe to other people. But it is a very worthwhile, beautiful process to go on.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, it's 2024, but we're nearing 2025, and the Hermit would be the collective tarot card of the year for numerology 9. And my personal tarot card is always the collective tarot card. So what you said also, I feel where I'm like, I'm definitely clearing things. Things are being removed, taking in new things, but whatever is coming in is preparing me for the next cycle, which is numerology number 1, which is the Magician, and so on, so forth. And I feel like as a collective energy, I hear astrologically, it's just going to be a crazy year next year. Like a lot's going on, as it is every year, it feels like. But I do feel like collectively, we're all taking in so much information all of the time that it's just like, there's no room for new information almost. So part of that clearing that is coming, or if you're not already experiencing it, is to make space for new things and new experiences to come in. And that could mean like coming back to our conversation of new pathways, new stories, new patterns that you want to insert into preparing for the new cycle to come.
Absolutely. 1,000%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sarah. This was such a beautiful, illuminating conversation. And I'd love for our listeners to follow you and also to listen to your podcast. So where can they find you?
Yeah, the best places are our studio newsletter. So you can just Google the Moon Studio and then you can sign up for our newsletter. We send them out about once a week. And I love them and people love getting them. To make it easy, my podcast is called Moonbeaming and you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And there's a really awesome conversation that was super inspirational with Grace. So you can find that one as well. So yeah, that's where folks can find me.
Amazing. All right. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Bye, Grace. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode with Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. This was such a rich and mystical conversation, one that invited us to sit with the unknown and listen more deeply to our intuition. Sarah brings such wisdom to the liminal spaces we often rush through. Here's a journaling prompt. What parts of yourself do you keep hidden in the shadows? What is your relationship to the unknown? Feel free to share in the comments, leave a podcast review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with a friend who might need to hear this message. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, especially if you're still processing whatever is unfolding for you. Sending you grace today and every day.